Hello everyone, my name is Marina. I'm one of the core team members for East Coast Salon Services. Today's tutorial is going to be a pixie haircut using a feather razor. Stay tuned. All right, so my sectioning started off from the high point of the round of the head, right to the top of the head. And then the back is a little triangle that comes down to the bottom of apex, just above the elbow. So the first section I'm going to do is I'm going to start right around the front hairline. So by now, guys, if you have watched all of the videos that we put up on our YouTube channel, then I hope that you are already very comfortable with the feather razor and comfortable with skimming motion. So you can fly through this haircut and create beautiful textured looks. So the first section is going to be the width of the blade minus the heel and the toe. And we're going to use a skimming technique. So skimming technique removes weight and length at the same time. I'm going to hold my fingers at a slightly higher elevation to make sure that I create a little bit more length on through the bottom and around the natural hairline. So hold my fingers where I want the end result to be. I'm going to place my blade flat against the hair, about 2 inches above my fingers. And I'm going to go ahead and remove length from the top of the section. And as I'm removing the length, I'm going to shorten my stroke little by little until I get to the overall length. And if you guys can see, the overall length is obviously shorter, but it's much more textured. And in this way, she could flip it away from the face or wear it towards the face. If there are any hairs that I left behind, I'm gonna go ahead and remove that. The rest of the haircut is pretty simple. Now that I've established my guide, I'm gonna use that guide for the rest of the haircut through the first major section that you guys see right now. Comb the hair out of the way, always being mindful that the width of the section is never wider than the width of the blade minus the heel and the toe. I'm going to hold the hair at the same exact point, find my shortest guide, and then remove length, keeping my elevation about the same, but shortening the stroke. So now the difference between previous videos that I've shown how to remove weight and length by using a skimming technique is I changed my elevation. The lower your elevation, the shorter the length that's going to be at the perimeter of the haircut. So if you want this to be closer and tighter, you're going to drop your fingers closer to the ear. If you want this to be loose and textury, you're going to keep your fingers up. Next section. Width of the section staying the same, but now because the hairline is much lower, I'm going to separate this section in two. So I'll have the width or the height of this section about the same place is where the hairline is in the front. This way I have exactly same rule that's going to apply. Hold the hair at the same elevation, find your shortest piece, your guide, about 2 inches above your fingers, keeping elevation about the same, and then shortening your stroke. From this point, I'm going to pick up the rest of the hair, keep it at the same elevation as where I finished, and removed the rest of the length. Now, if you want this to be really soft and fringy, you can detail that work out. Sometimes I leave it for the end, and sometimes I like to go ahead and do that just so that I have a really good visual of how the hair reacts and how the hair falls. All right, so now that I dropped the triangle section down, I'm going to take a horizontal section, use the guide that I see from underneath, and cut a line that's going to mirror the same length as underneath. So make sure you have enough of the guide between your fingers so that you could see where it is. But remember, this is a feather razor haircut, which means you're not going to see any hard lines. Now, the more closed the blade is, the harder this line is going to be. So you definitely want to keep it very open and very soft. Be mindful that this length cannot be any shorter than the length underneath, or otherwise this is going to look very weighty. Take the next section, keeping the sections a little on the finer side so I could see through. Find my guide, keeping my blade pretty open and removing the length. Now, the reason why I decided to take a horizontal section is because I'm going to create a slight disconnection as I get to the rounds of the head. That's going to give me a little extra length to work around the front hairline. Keeping my elevation slightly higher with each section. I'm subsectioning this section here because it's too wide. Going through, removing weight, taking the next part, elevation a little bit higher than previous. And the last part, keeping my fingers flat to me, which means parallel to the floor and parallel to my body. And the last section, I'm going to do the middle first to really make sure that I establish that square shape. Elevate a little bit higher, find my guide, remove weight and length, and then continue until you run out of hair to cut. I'm going to go through and make sure that the two lengths marry together and the weight is not too heavy. So what I'm looking for is if you comb this down, are there any weight points or the hair just sits really melty and beautifully blended together. All right, so now the last two sections that we have, we're going to continue in the same manner. I'm going to take a horizontal section. I'm going to clip this out of the way to make sure that it doesn't fall into my section. The longest piece that I have coming from the back is going to be the guide that I use. Now, if you use the actual longest piece, which is going to be right here, your front is going to be quite long. So you can decide which piece of hair you want to use. The farther back that you go, the shorter your guide is going to be, and the shorter the front is going to be. So I'm going to go with whatever the length that she has in the front because she's got curtain fringe that she really likes. So I'm going to use that same length and then cut that into a square shape. So careful not to use the guide coming from underneath because that length is going to be a little bit shorter because we created some over direction. Here's the guide that I'm going to use. Hold my fingers parallel to the floor. Skim the length, remove the weight. Subsection so that I could create skimming motion. And the last piece is pretty fine, so careful not to remove too much weight. I'm gonna go through and make sure I like everything nice and clean. So if I need to remove any random hairs that sort of fell out because the section is quite fine, I can go ahead and do a little skimming, but within my fingers. Check to make sure I like the length. I like where this is falling. Just gonna have a little disconnection right over here, which is gonna be perfect. And then the last section can be a little bit wider because I know she's already been skimmed before. Subsection, make sure the section is not too wide. Here's my guide underneath. Keep going, keep removing the weight and the length together. Nice and soft. careful not to put too much pressure onto the hair. The more pressure you put, the faster you're going to cut this off. So you want to give yourself enough room that you could actually skim, right? Not just remove the weight and the length altogether. Go through, make sure everything looks pretty. Any random hairs that might have fallen out, I'm gonna check that in. Right over here, there's a little guy. If hair is getting a little jaggedy on the ends, you might wanna consider changing your blade. Now we're gonna do the same thing on the opposite side. And the last part is going to be taking a triangle section, and that's the hair that falls all the way in the front. So we're gonna call this a fringe. We're gonna take it right at the round of the head and right on the outside of the eyebrow. The wider your section, the fuller the fringe is going to be. So she already has a current fringe. We're just gonna trim it up. I'm gonna bring that hair all the way forward. Make sure I have an even section in my fingers. And I'm going to combine this hair together. That's going to create a little over direction on the outside of the section. Keep combining very carefully, making sure that the hair is very clean without any overlap. Since she doesn't really want this much shorter, I'm going to hold this hair all the way around the ends. Hold my fingers, I'm pressing with my thumb to make sure that my hand doesn't slide. Hold the razor right directly on top. Up and down motion. And as I'm doing the up and down motion, I'm also turning the blade just a little bit to get the removal of the weight and the length on the outside of this section. We're going to continue doing this until we remove all of the hair. Now, if this hair has not been feathered before or has not been skimmed before, this might take a little bit longer. Enjoy the process and then try not to speed up. So there it is. Now, this length is already goes from short to long on the outside. This is going to really give me that current fringe effect by over directing it all the way towards the center. And whatever reaches is what I'm going to cut. I'm going to go through, remove a little bit of the weight from within the section, and then do the same thing on the opposite side. Bring it all the way towards the center, remove that a little bit, and then go through on this side and channel cut through to remove some of the weight. Now the wet shape of the haircut is done. We're going to do a quick blow dry and then show a little bit of finishing touches. All right, and some finishing touches. Here's a fringe. I love how it looks. I find this piece is a little long and a little heavy. So I'm just going to go through and then remove some of that length just so that she has some shorter pieces falling right in the front. Okay, and then a couple of pieces right over the ear. So I like how this is falling and very soft. Right behind the ear, it's a little heavy. So again, I'm gonna raise this up and then open and close the scissor to remove some of that length and some of that weight. And that's pretty much it. Hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and please check out all of the other tutorials that we have available on our YouTube channel.